Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. An original adaptation written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 6. Words of Wisdom. Time passed, and the initial shock of that New Year's night eventually began to fade. Gradually, the gossip of the court moved on to other topics. Which knight had achieved a feat of gallantry, which lord was courting which lady, that sort of thing. For Gawain, though, the topic did not move on. There was no other topic for him but the Green Knight and their impending reunion. He did his best to take the words that Bishop Bedtime had spoken to heart and to choose the path with faith that God had a plan for its completion, but it was not easy. For one thing, he was still none the wiser as to what allowing a gigantic green man to swing an axe at his neck could possibly do for the glory of God. For another, he found that the path was made all the more terrifying by his not actually being on it yet. When the journey began, and he actually set out in search of the Green Chapel, he knew it would be easier. There he would simply place one foot in front of the other and follow where it led, come what may. But somehow not having begun the journey was worse, far worse. Now he had the time to luxuriate in his own imagination. He would sit in his room staring into the fire, his mind concocting all kinds of horrific imaginings of what would lie before him. To distract himself, he threw himself into every task, every quest, every duty asked of the Knights of the Round Table. Wherever a knight was asked to take on a challenge, however small, Gawain would volunteer to be by his side. He rode with Lancelot, Bedivere, Bors, Peridor, Kay, Tristan, some of the greatest names ever to sit at the Round Table. Gawain would ride by their side, his sword at his hip, and the great green axe slung across his shoulders. So frequently was he out in the field that his name grew great regard, and despite the court gossip having moved on from his confrontation with the Green Knight, the name of Sir Gawain of the Green Axe was often on people's lips. His fame spread far and wide, and he found himself to be quite the popular figure at court. In particular, his fame grew with the ladies of the court, and he found his well-practiced smile coming in very handy on a regular basis. "Well," said the voice in his head, "there has to be some perks to all this." Still, despite the distractions, Gawain would find himself back in his room, staring at his fire, his mind running over and over and over the path that would lie before him in a few short months. The first shoots of spring began to burst through the ground, and as the frosts of winter died away and the air became alive with the sense of green growth, Gawain sat still in his room, waiting for a mission. Eventually, a knock came at the door, and Gawain shot to his feet, breathing a sigh of relief. "Finally," he said, "some action." The words died as he opened the door to find an unexpected face in front of him. "Your Majesty," he blurted out. "My Majesty," confirmed the king with a wry smile. "Might I come in?" Gawain was taken aback. Though he dwelled in the court of King Arthur, ate with him on several occasions, and was his nephew to boot, the king had never come to his rooms before. Indeed, the king did not call on other people. He was the king. Other people came to him. There was another momentary pause, where Gawain realized his mouth was wide open and the king was still waiting in his doorway. He shook himself and stammered out a reply. Of course, my king, you are most welcome." "Thank you," said the king, striding in and looking round the room. Gawain was suddenly conscious that he had not made his bed, and it had been far too long since he last tidied up, but seemingly Arthur was too polite to mention it. He looked around without speaking, his hands clasped gently behind his back, and Gawain realized that he'd left the king standing and stammered out another response. Can I offer you a seat and something to drink, my king?" He threw a cloak off one of his chairs and set it by the fireside. "A drink would be lovely, thank you, Gawain," said the king, nodding his thanks and sitting in the chair. "And I think we can dispense with the my king business. We are alone, after all." "Of course, my king. Of course, uncle." Arthur gave another small smile, his keen eyes sparkling, as Gawain pulled out some clay cups and poured out some wine he desperately hoped had not gone sour. "How long has that been sitting there?" said the voice in his head, and Gawain could not bring himself to think through the answer. The king took the cup, though, and there was a moment of companionable silence as the fire crackled merrily in the hearth, and Arthur sipped politely at the wine. Eventually, Gawain took a seat facing him, and the silence broke. "To what do I owe this honour, uncle? Is there another mission you wish to send me on?" "No, no," replied the king. "I think you've done quite enough errantry for now, Gawain. I can scarcely turn my head for hearing your name mentioned on some mission or other. In fact," he went on, his tone growing more serious, "that's rather what I wanted to speak with you about. I'm worried about you, Gawain." Again, Gawain was taken back. He'd thought he was doing a good job of hiding his worries about the future. "Well, I'm sorry to hear that, uncle. I must confess I'm scared of the task that lies ahead of me, but Bishop Badawin said—" "Not the task that lies ahead of you, Gawain," interrupted the king. "Not the future, not the great green knight. I'm worried about you now." Well, you're stewing, Gawain," the king went on. "I can see you doing it. You distract yourself with tasks and errands and romantic trysts, but you are stewing, and you have been for months. It's not good, Gawain. It's not healthy." "Well, he tried again. "Do you even know what month it is, Gawain?" Gawain was taken off guard. "What month is it?" asked the voice in his head. May?" he guessed. "It's March, Gawain. But you don't know that, because your mind is only on the coming Christmas and the task that lies ahead of you." "Well, what else should I be thinking about?" asked Gawain, his anger bubbling to the surface. "What else can I think about? The bishop tells me I should think about the path that's laid ahead of me. Well, fine, but how can I think about anything else? And who cares what time of year it is if this year will be my last?" He came to an abrupt stop, his chest heaving. At some point he'd stood up, but he had no recollection of doing so. He realised he'd just been shouting at the High King of all Britain and began to stammer an apology, but Arthur waved it away. "Gawain, I understand," the king began. "And of course you're afraid of the fate laid upon you, but it is precisely because this year may be your last that you should stop to notice the seasons. A man who does not take note of his footing as he walks a path is liable to spend much of his journey limping." Gawain sank back into his seat, all the breath rushing out of him. "But how am I to do that? I've tried to keep my mind away from the Green Knight, but he just keeps coming back to haunt me. I've thrown myself into missions and tasks and—" he paused, not wishing to recount the ladies he'd occupied himself with over the last few months. "Other distractions, but always I see this great green spectre ahead of me and my likely death that comes with him." Arthur smiled sadly. He set down his cup, leaned forward to Gawain and put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Gawain," said the king, "get your head out of your arse." Gawain was so shocked by this that he let out a splutter, but the king went on. "You're a knight, Gawain. You ride towards peril on a daily basis. Death-defying danger is practically your job description. Stop feeling sorry for yourself, and stop pretending that facing your mortality is in any way new to you." "Yes, but what, Gawain? This is different because you didn't see it coming?" "Go out to the common people of this kingdom and ask any of them if they feel like they have any inkling of when their last days will arrive. It is a mystery to us all, Gawain. It might be a giant green knight with an avaricious axe, or it might be a missed step on a darkened staircase, but this life comes with only one guarantee. None of us are getting out of here alive." There was a long silence as Gawain took that in. "I suppose you're right," he said eventually. "Of course I'm right," Arthur replied. "I'm the king. I'm always right. Look, Gawain, I understand this wasn't how you imagined your days would play out, but you are where you are, and no amount of fireside moping will change any of it. Do you want to reach the end of your days and find you wished them all away? No. You know the path that lies ahead of you. That's a gift not many people get. Now all that you can do is decide what you will do with the time that lies ahead of you. That is your choice. What legacy do you wish to leave?" "I suppose I'd never really thought about my legacy," said Gawain. "I'd always imagined it was quite a long way off." The king smiled at him, eyes twinkling. "Gawain, we write our legacy with every decision we make. Those missions you've spent the last 3 months going on, have you ever stopped to think about the outcome of your actions? The lives you saved, the lives you took? Or did you just charge into them because it was a moment for Gawain of the Green Axe to distract himself and prove his great and vaunted glory?" The crackling fire was the only sound as Gawain thought on that. "And those other distractions you've been occupying yourself with," the king went on, and Gawain blushed crimson as a flurry of faces flashed across his mind. Have you ever stopped to think of the consequences to them when you move on? Or were those consequences clouded by your next conquest? More silence. Gawain, I'm no priest, said the king. I cannot tell you the fate of a man's immortal soul. The bishop says you should trust that God will work some good in the path before you, and I believe him. But for the rest of us, I believe our lifelong goodness can only be measured by the answer to two simple questions. Have we made the lives of those we met better or worse? And did we leave this world a better place than we found it? You can't answer those questions if you're only looking at yourself, Gawain. Without another word, the king stood and walked to the door. Good luck, nephew, and he shut the door behind him, leaving Gawain to his thoughts, and he found, for the first time in a very long time, that they were not dominated by the Green Knight. Thank you for listening. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a Settle Stories commission. Written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story consultant was Miriam Sarin. Music was Tectonic by Saedra, downloaded via Uppbeat. It was a Parable Arts production.